Now, Russian casualties have fallen by around 30% a day this month. That's according to British intelligence. Officials say it is likely due to the end of Moscow's winter offensive. Footage released by the Russian Ministry of Defense claims to show artillery units supporting ground operations in Bakhmut. Now, the city, which is in eastern Ukraine, has been the centre of fighting for months, with neither side making any significant territorial gains. Despite the current impasse, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have been called up to fight. DW's Nick Connolly travelled to the Donbas frontlines earlier this month to find out how Ukraine's citizen soldiers are dealing with life in the trenches, often under constant fire.
As spring turns wet snow to mud, keeping upright is even harder than it looks. This forest might seem empty, but it's actually full of soldiers, all on the lookout.
We've got to keep our voices down because near here, the Russians are just a matter of a few hundred meters away.
Ivan and his friend are in a forward position. Without leaves on the trees, it feels exposed. But at least they can see Russian units when they approach. Soon, they'll be better hidden, but so will the other side.
Саме важке, коли тихо.
Тихо?
Так, бо тоді можуть йти. Тоді більше уваги. Так як вони накривають, то впевнений, що вони не близько. А коли тихо, саме таке, що коли можуть підповзти.
Ivan will be here for 2 days and 2 nights. That might not seem long, but it's intense and exhausting. 2 hours on watch, then 2 hours sleep, then watch again. Powered by heat packs and energy drinks.
Це четвірка, отам троєчка, ще в процесі будування ззаді вас. Перший день, як тільки заступили перший раз сюди, то по нас там 120-та міна працювала, то десь метрів 20-30. Такі звуки і хвиля досить гучні.
Like hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian service people, Ivan had never held a rifle before the Russians invaded last year. Citizen soldiers like him are having to learn fast.
Ми зазвичай собі між товаришами щось віджартовуємося. Тут таке спасає. На негативі бути довго не протягнеш.
Дзвонимо мамі,
просив, я дзвонив мамі і просив, щоб вона мене звідси забрала. То ми собі так жартуємо.
This is the main dugout, a cave blasted into the hillside. It's warm and dry and feels safe. After the constant stress outside, there's time and space here to take a breath.
Кожного з нас є у когось малюнок чи малюнки, там присилає. Тобто ми ці малюнки, ніхто їх не викидує, ніхто їх нікуди не діває. Ось вони зберігаються у нас. Так вони носяться з перших днів. Цей малюнок з Німеччини передавали. Писано лист, що дякуємо за те, що ви захищаєте нас. Сподіваємося на повернення.
Дружина вагітна буквально здається, в березні місяці, тобто на початку війни. Я став батьком вже на війні безпосередньо. Якраз так повезло, що мене відпустили, коли він народився. І то він народився, я не був в пологовому, а якраз в дорозі був з полігону безпосередньо в лікарню.
The idea that they're fighting Russia now so that their children don't have to is something you hear a lot from Ukrainian soldiers. No one here believes that Russia is going to negotiate in good faith. This armoured personnel carrier is normally used to bring out the wounded. It knocks its passengers around so much that soldiers joke many of the wounded pick up new injuries on their way to safety.
Мы в режиме 24/7 принимаем вызовы, как скорая помощь, только немножко такая необычная скорая помощь, да, с риском, что тебя могут убить. Вот, например, вчера рядом с нами была обстреляна расположение, там было порядка 13 раненых и 2 погибших. Психоэмоциональное состояние людей очень сильно страдает.
Soldiers with extreme psychological trauma are evacuated out, Taras tells us, but most have to keep going. and pills are as much help as they can expect. In his civilian life, Taras worked as a neurologist. He knows his way around a medicine cabinet.
Это практически все. Это все антидепрессанты и противотревожные лекарства. Это я собрал и по необходимости сейчас всем нуждающимся. Они будут иметь чисто симптоматический эффект, да, потому что если мы говорим о лечении тревожного синдрома, депрессии, стрессовых расстройств, то основным лечением это является, скажем так, минимизация травмирующих психоэмоциональных факторов, которые во время войны априори невозможно. Да. Поэтому активно пользуемся и всем советую.
And it's not just the patients that are feeling the strain. So do those working here. Taras tells us he too has started taking antidepressants. Since this war began over a year ago, he's only seen his family for a few days at a time.
Все, кого вы видели сейчас, это все гражданские люди, не военные профессиональные. Это все мобилизированные люди. Считайте, 20% у нас профессиональных, контрактных военнослужащих. Все остальное это мобилизированное. Это выход. Все нормально. Все в порядке.
DW's Nick Connolly, who filed that report, joins us now from Kyiv. Hi, Nick. I mean, some really intimate insights there into soldiers' lives on the front. What was it that struck you most about what you heard from the people that you spoke to when you were filming that report?
I think the thing that you really pick up on first is quite how normal those explosions become. People just don't flinch unless it's a matter of a few dozen meters away. People just go on about their lives as normal. That is their daily reality. I think there's a lot of dark humour. I think that's, as one of our protagonists there said, the only way you can cope with everything that's going around. There's a real sense of closeness between people that you don't get if you go 10, 20 kilometres away from the front lines. That danger really brings people together. We spent quite a bit of time with them. There wasn't really a sense they were acting for us or kind of hiding stuff. There was genuinely a sense of kind of camaraderie. Lots of these people had just arrived though, so maybe it would be different after time. But there is also a sense of determination that for lots of them maybe it came as a surprise that Ukraine has done as well as it has been able to hold up, and they were willing to carry on.
As we heard from them, they had very normal jobs in their previous lives. How are they coping with their new reality? Is it a matter of taking antidepressants?
Well, I think, it's important to say that you have really people from the most kind of varied careers. You have people who are working in construction in Poland who came back to fight. You have people who are working as bankers and consultants in Kiev who just come back from exotic holidays when the war began. So that really is a very diverse group of people. Everyone you talk to there says that basically no training can really prepare you for the reality of being on the front lines. That is just something you have to go through. People we saw there on the front lines, none of us seemed in need of medication and certainly didn't admit to it, but obviously that doctor from a different unit there gave a different tale, albeit a slightly different part of the front lines. I think it's really kind of down to the individual, how they're able to process it, how that much their family and their kind of the people back home are able to understand and talk to them about what they're going through, and crucially how much time they get off. The doctor we spoke to there had only seen his family for a couple of weeks in the space of a year. Longer time obviously allows people to really get away from that stress and to kind of reconnect to their families. But right now it doesn't look like Ukrainian soldiers are going to get much time off for the foreseeable future.
I mean, you paint a picture of sort of real resilience amongst these soldiers, and Ukrainians have certainly shown extraordinary determination in the last year during the war. But I mean, how much longer can this go on for? How much longer can soldiers like this hold out in the situation that they're in?
Well, it's certainly the case that everyone there just takes this one day at a time. No one wants to make plans or really imagine how long this could go on for, but there certainly wasn't any appetite among the people we spoke to for some kind of deal that would freeze the conflict where it is now. That's exactly what Russia wants, what the Kremlin wants, and people there were convinced that that would just allow Russia to regroup and to then carry on. They're convinced that Russia still wants to take all of Ukraine and not just parts of Ukraine's territory. But there was certainly an honesty that the adrenaline of the first few months was gone. People were having to be more effective about the way they used their energy and looked after their health. And there was a bit of criticism from people there about people back home when they got that leave, that lots of people here in places like Kiev kind of felt like life had kind of almost got back to normal. There was a sense there that not everyone in Ukrainian society was giving them the support and the backup that they needed.
Nick, thank you so much for that. That's Nick Connolly reporting from Kyiv.
Our very own Nick Connolly on the front lines in Ukraine. Well, let's bring in Robert van Voren, head of the Federation Global Initiative on Psychiatry. It provides mental health support in Ukraine. What are the best ways to endure the trauma in this war?
Well, the best way to endure this trauma is, of course, if you have a possibility of getting all the anxiety and stress off your chest, which is impossible when you're in the front line. Secondly, if there would be sufficient time for rotations for people to take a leave from the front line. And this is a big problem because people are very often in these stressful situations for a long period, for months in a row. And the result is that if they go home on rotation, that the conditions of living at home are in a way stressful again, because they're back with their family who haven't endured what they endured. A lot of them have complaints that they cannot even sleep because it's silent. They're used to sleeping with the bombing, and then the silent is suddenly, the scary thing. And also the feeling of guilt, because they are suddenly temporarily in a safe situation, but they know that their buddies are at the front, and many of them just want to go back in order to fight again.
When rotations aren't possible, though, tell me more about the extensive time that people spend on the front lines. The Second World War view was that even the hardiest soldiers suffer psychological collapse after sufficient time in combat, and that was defined as between 200 and 240 days.
Yeah, so, the time that people are at the front sometimes is 4 months, 5 months, which is really very long. And you need to understand the conditions of the war in eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine are special. I think the best comparison probably is with the battle in northern France during the First World War, the battle at the Somme, 1916. These are conditions that really create the worst possible conditions for someone's psychological condition. And this is the scary thing, because, if we are looking at the number of people that are in the army and the number of people that now have frontline experience, we are talking about probably over 500,000 Ukrainian men. We can expect huge problems when the war comes to an end, long-lasting problems, and the country needs to be prepared for that. And it's not, because this is such a vast problem that it means that we need to prepare the grounds, we need to educate people, we need to be ready to receive them and deal with the psychological conditions that they will be showing.
Well, is there anything else psychiatrists can do besides prescribing pills before sending soldiers back to the front?
I think under these conditions, the only thing what is possible is to try to allow them to take a rest on a regular basis, which is something that is very difficult when you have a war like this. Pills, they subdues, as it were, the symptoms, but they don't take away the long-term traumatic experiences and the problems that will be coming afterwards. And so I think for psychiatrists, this is it's a horrible situation, because you see what is happening, but there's very little you can do except trying to to contain a person's psychological state, and what is coming afterwards.
And you mentioned the vastness of the problem for Ukraine. What about the effect on society? Because there's evidence this kind of trauma is passed down to generations to come.
Yeah, so, apart from the military, of course, you have the civilians. We are looking to start with at millions and millions of displaced persons, internally displaced or refugees abroad. Then you have the family of the people that are fighting at the front. People will come back, veterans will come back within their families, will have difficulty in getting themselves adjusted to regular life, to re-establish connection with their spouses, with their children, with the rest of their family, to start again with a regular job. So, you know, it's a vast entity of psychosocial problems that need to be resolved. And one of the issues is to talk too early about trauma, too early about the need to give mental health care support in itself can create a trauma. By talking about trauma, you kind of evoke the feeling of trauma, which actually can lead to a traumatic situation in a person's life. So I think very important is to make sure that there are sufficient organizations and institutions in the country that help veterans to return to society and to become active members of society again. But then if you look at the data, for instance, in Britain, research among veterans who fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, you see that quite a large number, a large percentage have inroads with justice, commit crimes, and there is a certain percentage which actually commit violent crimes and wind up in the prison system. So one of the projects that we are focusing on is to develop a specialized unit within the penitentiary system in Ukraine that will be able to deal with veterans that wind up in the prison system and should be taken care of separately from the rest of the prisoners, because you know, spending several years within the prison system it takes you out of society, and to establish a normal life after that is becoming even more difficult.
The huge challenges there for Ukraine. Robert van Voren, head of the Federation Global Initiative on Psychiatry in Kyiv.